whatever industry you want to get into, see if there's special letters you could put behind your name, and that'll go a long way. It shows that you're a professional and that you're committed to this career field that you're seeking.
This is the Construction Veteran Podcast.
Construction Veteran Podcast.
Connecting and celebrating veterans in construction. Now, here's your host, Scott Friend.
Welcome back to the Construction Veteran. I'm Scott Friend, and I'm excited to bring to you guys Lou Gomez. Lou's a retired Green Beret who now spends his time as a project manager in the construction industry. Let's dig into it. Hey Lou, how's it going, man?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to get you on here. You are a very unique circumstance. Lou listened to my episode with Trevor Murray, who I believe they served together or knew each other in the SF groups, and he reached out to me. So bravo to you for that. And we got to chatting, and I thought it'd be great to get him on. So Lou, let's talk a little bit about what you did in the service.
I spent 25 years in the Army. My first 10 years as a human resources specialist, and then 15 years in Special Forces as a 18 Charlie Special Forces engineer. And then I got promoted to E8, and so I was an 18 Zulu.
Very cool. I am so stoked to finally get a Charlie series of you guys on here. Awesome. Every SF guy I've talked to, I'm like, man, I got to get an engineer on here. So that's great. And what a huge shift going from HR to not just SF, but SF engineering too. What took you on that path?
Well, to be honest with you, when I joined the military, I didn't really know much about the military at all. My mom just kind of strongly encouraged me to join because I was kind of living a dead end life. Dropped out of high school, got my GED. So when I went to MEPS, they offered me. I scored high enough to do pretty much any job, but I had a bit of a troubled past where I had to get some waivers, more like moral waivers to come in. So it all boiled down to 4 jobs that they had available that I could take. And one was that human resources job, and then 3 mechanic jobs. And so I was like, the recruiter said, this HR job, it's like 9 to 5 weekends off. You work with a bunch of women. So I was like, sign me
up. Were you a single guy at that time?
I was, yes. I was 18 years old when I joined.
Yes. You were the women part and nothing else, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's cool. So, I guess you were just thinking this is going to be like a one and done type contract thing.
Yep, exactly. I planned on doing 4 years and getting out. And then my dream as a child was to be a police officer in San Antonio. So I figured I'll just do 4 years and I'll be old enough to join the academy afterwards. But, once I got to know the military and understand it, my first duty station, I was at Fort Lewis, Washington. And I pretty immediately noticed how I was different than most of my peers. I was like the PT stud. I was motivated, shine my boots every night, press my BDUs, my uniform. And, and I remember working in this personnel services battalion. We used to have PSBs back then. And these S1s would come and drop off distro, do their distro runs. And I remember seeing guys from 2nd Ranger Bat. They had pack clerks, as they called us, in their battalion. And those were the guys I looked like. And I remember seeing them, and I was like, man, that's who I look like. And so that's when I started, looking down the path of special operations.
So did you spend any time in Ranger Bat before SF?
Unfortunately, no. When I talked to their guy in charge, the NCOIC, I said, hey, what do I got to do to be a Ranger? And he was like, he was shocked because they don't get a whole lot of people in Army West volunteering to do stuff like that. So he filled out my 407, my paperwork, and he told me to get signed by my commander. So I'm sorry, just to backtrack, the 407 is like a military form for like requesting some type of personnel action. So I gave it to my commander, and he disapproved it. So I stuck it in my desk drawer at work and just went on with life. And then a couple of weeks later, that gentleman came back and said, hey, where's that 427? I told him my commander denied it. And he said, I don't care. I just needed him to sign it. And so
that's awesome.
I gave it to him. He called me later that day, said, hey, when do you want to go to airborne school? And I said, man, I'll go as soon as possible. So in 1999, or I think it was February 1999. I went to airborne school, and after that, I went to the Ranger Indoctrination Program. And while I was there, the medics were looking at my medical records, and I had some paperwork in there from the stuff that I did as a teenager. I was hospitalized for. I went to school like a little intoxicated and got into it with a teacher, and so they expelled me. They put me in an alcohol treatment program, and I finished my sophomore year in that program. So that was one of the more waivers I had to get. So when they saw that in my paperwork, they said, "Hey, man, you're not going to be able to get security clearance." So they sent me home. And then fast forward, about 10 years down the road, I get stationed in Texas here in San Antonio. My wife and I get stationed in Korea after that. And that's when I told her, I said, at the time, I still wanted to be a Ranger, but I was an E5 promotable. And being a soft skill MOS, non-combat arms, I was like, I don't even know if they'll accept me there being an NCO that's not tabbed. So I told my wife, like, hey, I want to try out for Special Forces. And she said, okay, well, if you make it, then I'll get out of the military so I can take care of the kids, because she figured I'd be gone quite a bit.
Yeah, so she served as well?
Yes, she was in the Army for about 7 years cumulatively. And since she got out after Korea, she's been working as a GS civilian.
Oh, cool. That's really neat that she was so supportive of that too, because I know, and you've probably heard stories, a lot of guys, they don't have that support network from their spouse, and they really want to take that route. So it's either get out or kind of stick it out on whatever you're doing. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, sir.
So you are now in the construction industry. So let's talk about what you're doing now. What is it?
Right now, I'm a project manager for a construction company, building my portion of what we do. The company's based out in McAllen, Texas, down south in the valley, South Texas. They do apartment buildings, storage units. They were doing like housing, building houses, but I think they're starting to pull away from that. But my job out here in the Central Texas area is just building their storage units.
Very cool. So how did you get into that, man? Because you went from blowing stuff up to building stuff up. So
Yeah, exactly.
can you, real quick, can you explain to those people that don't know, what does an 18 Charlie do? So that's a Special Forces engineer sergeant. What does that role typically entail?
Well, like you mentioned, the majority of what we do, there's a heavy emphasis in demolitions, explosives, identifying unexploded ordnance. But when I was going through the training to become, to qualify for that MOS, they taught us, they gave us a pretty solid foundation on the wave tops of construction trades. So, I poured like a 10 by 10 concrete slab. They taught me I had to calculate how much concrete I needed to order, set up the forms, the batter boards. We built like small CMU walls, built some trusses. So we did framing, electrical, plumbing. So I had a general understanding of the construction trades.
Did you have any of that prior to joining the service?
Not really. I mean, just, learning a little bit of stuff from my grandpa and my uncle, but, I always enjoyed kind of tinkering with things, playing with tools and whatnot.
Yeah. So you're getting out, you retired out. How did you fall into what you're doing now?
Well, I knew there were two career paths I wanted to take. One being, doing some type of instructor role, like personnel development or construction. I wanted to get a job with home builders and build houses. Honestly, when I was getting ready to transition from the military, I didn't really focus on networking. I had a pretty arrogant approach, because I was like, man, 25 years in the military, 15 years as a Green Beret. I've done this, done that. At the time, I was in an MBA program, so I figured people were going to be throwing jobs at me. And as soon as I started my terminal leave, I started applying for jobs, and was pretty, it was a huge shock that I wasn't getting phone calls for interviews. I remember one job in particular, I believe it was on Indeed, where it was a project manager job for a construction company. And once I uploaded my resume and all that stuff, and I went to submit it, it said that company required that I take a project management test on Indeed, and like right then and there. And so I was like, oh, well, I wasn't prepared for this, but if it's required, just do it. So I started that test, and I'm going through it, answering the questions, and I'm telling myself, like, I must be missing something because these answers seem really easy. And so I was afraid I was messing it up, but I went ahead and just completed it, submitted it, and the results came back at an expert level, that I was at an expert level for project management. And so I was like, oh man, I'm sure going to get a phone call for this one. And nope, not even a phone call for an interview or anything. So it was pretty disheartening. So with this job that I'm in now, I was very fortunate because of a friend that I served with in 7th Group. I've known the guy for 15, 16 years. We're in the same company, been to Afghanistan together. He knows the owner of this company well. They go hunting together. And so they've known each other for like 5, 6 years. Well, when he retired, the company's starting to grow. So the owner calls him and says, hey, what do you think about moving out here to the Valley, to McAllen, and being my director of operations? So he did it. He and his wife moved out there, both working with the company. And once the company was ready to start spreading throughout Texas, they bought like 4 pieces of land in the San Antonio and surrounding areas. And that's when my buddy reached out and said, hey, what do you think about working in this career field? And I was like, bro, this is exactly what I wanted to do. And so that's how I got my foot in the door. Just blessed to have that opportunity for where someone would take a chance on me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's your network right there. Because I'm always trying to encourage people that even if it's uncomfortable, man, to network outside of the military when you first get out, but we've got that network kind of built in. I mean, even if you guys are still active duty, it's, hey, my uncle's in this, or, my brother-in-law does this. Why don't you talk to him type thing? Right. I got to ask it. So you retired as a master sergeant?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what's your thought on the mentality of folks that are getting out at that level? I mean, as a senior NCO, do you think it was maybe like a lack of humility because you're going, oh man, everybody should be knocking on my door? Do you think that's pretty common?
I would say at least half the time. A lot of guys that were transitioning the same time as me, they went through. There's some good like nonprofit organizations that help translate what a special operations forces operator does. It translates into civilian terminology. I went through one of those programs, but again, I didn't take it as serious as I should have, in retrospect. But I've seen guys, a lot of the guys, especially in special forces, they get out and they get some pretty high paying jobs, or they go do contracting. Me personally, I didn't want to do the contracting role. I didn't want to go that route. For me, it was, I've been gone for 25 years. I want to come back to San Antonio, and I want to reconnect with my family. And so that right there was probably another hindrance, if you will, because I wasn't really willing to relocate. I was like, I'm going to work in San Antonio, and that's it. Now, with this company, I do a little bit of traveling. I'm finishing a project in Odessa right now, but for the most part, I'm home.
Yeah, good on you, man. You definitely made the right choice there. And I always get encouraged by guys that decide to get out and really focus on their family. So you knew you wanted to go into construction. Was it what you did in the teams? Is that what really drove you towards that? Like, what was it that fired you up about this industry?
Well, man, I had some amazing experiences in Afghanistan. Not just being on missions and doing the combat action part of it, but being on the fire base in the middle of nowhere, where things go wrong, And as the H and Charlie, as an engineer on the team, there's only 2 of us. There's a senior and there's a junior, if you're lucky, and if when things go wrong, the team's looking at you. And I always used to say the H and Charlie can be the hero or the zero of the team, because we do the purchase request. We try to get cool stuff for the team when we need, when there's money that we can spend. And on that same note, in Afghanistan, if something goes wrong and we can't fix it, then now we're taking away like a luxury, a creature comfort in the middle of nowhere. I have an example. There was 2012. We were doing what they called village stability operations, where we were living amongst the locals in a village and trying to recruit them to establish their own local police force. So we're training these guys up to be their own police and be able to take care of their own town. So we're in this village, we're in this one compound, and the team that we replaced, they actually did a good job building it up pretty nicely. There was a big like masonry building with toilets, showers, hot water, washers and dryers. And so having a luxury like that in the middle of nowhere it's huge, And one day, all this dirty black water, I call it black water because, it's sewage water. So it backed up into this whole building. And after our morning meeting, my junior Charlie, I tell him, hey, man, let's go, see if we can figure out what's going on. And he was like, man, I don't know how we're going to find this leak. And I said, well, I mean, we're in Afghanistan. We're surrounded by sand. Let's get on the roof and see if we can find a wet spot.
It's going to be pretty obvious.
Yeah, so we get on the roof, and sure enough, like right there, about a foot away from the side of the building, there's this big wet spot. So I go down there, I get a shovel, and I was like, hey, man, let's start digging. And, about a foot down, I'm starting to get in some slushy poop water, and just kept on digging, and we uncovered the pipe, and it was broke. It had cracked and was broken. It had broken all the way through. And these PVC pipes out there are like, it's not American standard. These things were probably about a 1/4 inch thick, so they're very brittle.
Oh, wow.
Well, again, we're in the middle of nowhere, living in a village in a remote area. So I'm like, man, what am I going to do? I don't have any replacement parts. And I look up at my interpreter and I say, hey, man, go to that little store in the village and get me an inner tube for the moped tires. And he looked at me kind of puzzled. And I said, hey, man, just go do it. Just go get it for me. And so he goes. I tell my junior Charlie, hey, go get me some of those big heavy duty zip ties. And the terp comes back. I get that inner tube and I cut like a rectangular strip out of it. And I put a bunch of Gorilla Glue around both ends of the pipe and put that inner tube and then zip tie it down with those zip ties. And it worked. We started running water and it was running through the pipe with no problems. So, something like that where if I wasn't able to get that, come up with a solution to fix that, now guys can't poop in a toilet. Now they can't take a hot shower. They can't wash their laundry. And so that's what defines a really good Agent Charlie. You can be the hero or you can be the zero. And I was happy to be able to put a smile on the guy's face, the team's face, that day.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, nothing against people who haven't deployed, but I think sometimes we take for granted some of those creature comforts that we have. We have running water, we have electricity, those things that make life easier. And I've told people in the past, as a CB, it was so cool to bring guys that the little stuff, the creature comforts of, hey, will you build me a nightstand? Or, hey, oh my gosh, we have a tent that has running water for a shower. This is amazing. And like, we definitely take that for granted. But I'm sitting here cheesing ear to ear about that story. That's really cool, man. I mean, OSHA and building codes don't really exist over there. So you got to do what you got to do to get it done, that's really cool, man. I'm glad you shared that story. So that kind of motivation just to bring this stuff and bring the building environment to people. What is it about that really just said, hey, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
It's amazing to, let me back up. Like when I was an instructor, I was a military freefall instructor. And I believe that's where I really learned how to communicate with people, how to speak their individual language. And the most fulfilling part of being an instructor was seeing those people develop so quickly, see them grow, going from week one, like being in the wind tunnel, death by PowerPoint on training slides, learning how to pack the parachute. And then that next Monday, I'm pushing them out of a plane at 13,000 feet, and I'm just right there by their side. And it's the same thing in construction where just seeing this empty plot of land, and in the matter of, 8 to 12 months, I've got a 2-story the project I have going on in Cibolo right now near San Antonio, it's 165,000 square feet. And we're ahead of schedule. I've got great subcontractors, and just knowing what it looked like when it was just raw land to what it looks like right now, it's just captivating. I love it to watch things develop like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It is extremely rewarding to see that. I mean, I've talked with other guests in the past. It's tough, man, when you're going through the muck and nobody ever said that construction's easy. I mean, for the guys in the field, it's laborious. It's sometimes backbreaking work. The stress can get ridiculous sometimes, but it's crazy. I mean, even the worst projects I've been on, you step back at the end of the day, like that's awesome. Like we're just so glad. It's kind of like I would liken it to, for me, like going through training and then you finally make it to the end of that training. You look back. I can imagine maybe it was like you for like the Q course. You know, you go through that and you're like, oh my gosh, this sucks. This is really hard. But once you're finally done and you get to don that Green Beret, that's got to be extremely rewarding. I'm not.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. I am in no way comparing a project to the Q course, but that feeling of satisfaction, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So this is going to be a big open-ended question here. With your roles, both in HR and with what you did as a Charlie, what do you think really helped you the most? I mean, we talked about that communication, some of the practical skills about, fixing things real quick, just kind of doing whatever it takes. What have you found in the last few years since you've been out that really sticks out to you? Like, hey, I got that from my time in service.
In the HR world, and I tell people to this day, I was like, man, I don't like doing admin stuff, but I'm really good at it. It taught me how to be organized, how to double and triple check paperwork and ensure that I'm submitting a good product. I used to be like a memo Nazi. Like I'd look at the spacing, the like make sure that the signature block starts on the fifth space after the last sentence. So it taught me to be very like kind of like being a jump master. You've got that eagle eye. So it teaches that precision. And then the same thing as being an 18 Charlie. As an 18 Charlie, you're the team supply guy. So we had to do our sensitive items inventories. I was in charge of the property book. I was in charge of the team budget. I submitted purchase requests. And then, I was also having to develop a training plan, a training schedule for demolition training, breaching training, whatever type of training we're doing. So you learn that attention to detail in the military. And whether you're in the regular Army or you're in special operations, but more so in special operations, I learned a lot about being, having that attention to detail, ensuring that what leaves that team room has your name on it. And so it's got to be as precise and perfect as possible because that's your reputation. And in special forces, they always say your reputation precedes you.
Yeah. So I would liken that to leaving your stamp on the project. I mean, the quality of the project, the paperwork too, like you said. I mean, I've been on some government jobs and it's got to be perfect to a T. So I think that's cool. You got the admin background and the practical side of it as well. So do you think, looking back, I think I know the answer to this, but do you think this is the route you would have taken if you could do it all over again?
Yeah, absolutely. I love what I do. And one thing I promised myself after being in the military so long, which, I loved what I did, but I told myself, I don't really have to work. If I want to retire, I can just retire. But first of all, I'm young. I'm only 44. And second of all, I feel like there's still something that I can contribute. And so that was a promise I made to myself. Whatever job I take, it's going to be where I can contribute and make a positive impact on the people around me. And so that I get that fulfillment in this job. Working the subs love working with me because, they tell me horror stories about guys, superintendents and PMs they've worked with that, say racist things to them and yell at them and curse at them. And they're like, man, how are you so cool and calm all the time? And I tell them, I was like, well, why am I going to get mad over something? It's going to work out. We're going to figure out a way to make this happen. Plus, I'm dealing with guys that I see them as being the same as my teammates on the team. Even when I was a team sergeant, I was the most experienced, the highest ranking guy on the team on the enlisted side. I had guys that were 2 or 3 ranks below me, but I was always cognizant of the fact that I'm leading alpha males. And if I speak to them in a manner where I'm testing their manhood, like if I'm condescending or I'm aggressive towards them, I fully expect to get punched in the face, and rightfully so.
That's very wise. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I take that same mentality to the job site. I talk to all my subcontractors like they're men or women. I speak to them with respect. I thank them for what they do. I appreciate their time. I mean, they love working with me because of that. Because I don't see them as subordinates. I hate that. I actually hate that word. They're equals to me. We're all team members trying to accomplish the same mission.
Yeah, 100%.
We're all stakeholders. No matter if you're the guy just opening bags of cement mix and dumping it in the mixer, or you're the owner of the company that's out there making sure the guys are laying their CMU blocks properly. We all have a stake in that project.
Yeah, good on you for doing that too, man. I look forward to the day where somebody comes up to you and said, "Hey, remember when I was that laborer and you didn't treat me like dirt?" It's a stressful industry, but it's so easy to just treat people with respect, especially these guys that have been in the trades for quite a while and can teach you something.
Exactly. I learn a lot from these guys on a daily basis.
So take me back. So you're joining the service. You get into the HR role. You go into SF. Is there anything you would say, maybe if there's somebody that's listening that is in that pathway, maybe not HR specifically, but maybe they want to take the SF route, or they want to get into construction. Is there something you personally would do that you think maybe would have been better in that timeline, or something maybe you could change for the better?
For someone that's transitioning, I think the best advice I can give is, if you know what you want to do, then start making those connections, start reaching out to people. Like the podcast you had with Trevor, he mentioned that he created his own skill bridge program. He went and sought out a company that he wanted to work for, said, "Hey, the Army will let me work for you for free for a few months, and then see if you like me, and hire me when I get out." And that's something that I would definitely recommend, is don't hesitate to get out there, start networking and selling yourself. Because like for me, I was looking at the skill bridge program, but the way the Army does it is you have to exhaust all your leave, because the skill bridge program is done on like TDY, temporary duty, or permissive TDY, something like that. And at the time I had like over 100 days of leave saved up because of COVID, so I was like, no, man, I'm not going to waste 3 months of free leave where I can start. So my mentality was, I'll sign out on terminal leave. I'll have 3 months to find a job. And it, like, as we mentioned earlier, it didn't quite work out that way. I had a heck of a time job. But yeah, that's the one piece of advice I give, is if you know what you want to do, go find that company and set up your own skill bridge.
Yeah, that was very smart of Trevor to do that for sure. And there are so many resources out there that I got off active duty in 2011. A ton of these resources were not available. I mean, there weren't things like this podcast. There weren't a skill bridge program. So I kind of had to make my way. But I think guys like us, that's rare. But you have to take the first step and find that. I mean, man, it's so easy to go on Google or LinkedIn and find people and just connect up with them. Like you reached out to me. I've had other people that haven't even heard the podcast that have reached out to me. And I think it's great that people have that now. So really there's no excuse not to try to at least start the path, right?
Right, exactly. And another piece of advice I give is look into what certifications will make you, that set you apart from the others. If there's, like I got a project management certification, but if whatever industry you want to get into, see if there's special letters you could put behind your name, and that'll go a long way. It shows that you're a professional and that you're committed to this career field that you're seeking.
Yeah, 100%. I even made a video about certifications, and if you're in, I mean, that's the best time to do it, in my opinion, because I did a little bit of college classes while I was in before I got out, and it's free. You use that tuition assistance. I would imagine there's got to be certifications programs that they will give these to free. There's typically on post or base, there's an extension of the local college, like community college. There's got to be something available to you that you can go and get that PMP, or go and get that, first aid, CPR, OSHA, all like kind of the basics that will, you can say, hey, look, I've got this experience. And in addition to that, I've got these acronyms behind my name.
Yep, exactly.
So I like to ask people this industry can get extremely stressful. And with a lot of vets that, a lot of us do carry some baggage over, I'll say, from time in service, some of that mental, some of that, physical. If there's guys that are in the industry or girls that are in the industry right now that did serve, especially like that first, I'll say 1 to 5 year span when you get out, that's probably the hardest time frame because you're adjusting and they're just kind of down in the dumps and not really knowing if this is the industry for them. What would you say to them?
The first thing I tell them is don't even let that stigma stop you from getting the help you need. Get the help you need, because I've worked with people outside of the military. They're not handling their stress as well as I do. And I attribute that to the fact that I went through a really good program that the VA had in Tampa, Florida, called PrEP program, PREP. And it was a polytrauma program, 3-week inpatient for people suffering from, a lot of traumatic brain injuries. And that program, those 3 weeks that I was there, it was just a 3-week assessment. And if they want you to come back, they'll invite you to come back for like a 6-week intensive. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time because I was right in the middle of my transition, but just those 3 weeks changed my life. They treat you from head to toe, physical therapists, dietitians, everything. And they put me on a medicinal regimen that got me straight, got me focused back on life. And I was eventually able to come off of them. And I haven't been on any meds for about 2 years now.
That's
so
awesome.
The first thing is, if you want to be successful after the military in their next career, get the help that you need before you get out. Get it, because one thing I can say that I've learned in the civilian life is medical care isn't as accessible as it was for me in the military. And I pay for TRICARE Prime, but it takes me weeks just to get in to see my PM. Where, back in SF world, I could just walk down the hall and tell my doc, "Hey, man, I got a cough. Can you give me some cough drops?"
Yeah, exactly.
So, and if people that don't get the help that they need, it's really going to be hard to figure out what you want, because you're going to be saying having a lot of negative thoughts, like, "I would really like to do that, but I'm not as qualified as this person," or, they're not going to give me a chance because I'm a veteran. They probably think that I have PTSD. But, like, you have those negative thoughts when you're not addressing the issue.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of segue into another subject related. So we're both Liberty University grads, so I assume there's a faith background there too. So I think that is biblically, that there are people that are getting attacked by that, and those are all false. Nobody's going to think negatively of you, and I think that's possibly the enemy trying to keep you down. And I am so encouraged, at least over the last decade, to see a major shift not only in the service towards supporting mental health, but also in the construction industry, because there is an outrageous statistic out there about suicide in the construction industry. And then you couple that with guys that have issues getting out of the service, and it just feels like your world is imploding. But to the flip side, what I've seen that's really cool on my job sites, quick side story, if you've listened to some of my episodes, I thought I was going to go back to active duty as an Army chaplain. So I did a little bit of time in the reserves in that role. But when I talk to the guys on the job site and say, "Hey, this is, what I do," I was bivocational, pastoring a church for a little while. And when I tell guys that, it's so neat to see these guys come out of the woodworks and, "Hey man, I'm dealing with this and that." And I honestly mean it. And I follow up with these guys when I say, if you want to come to my office and just talk about this stuff, I'm not going to judge you. I don't think you're any worse or better than the next guy. I just want you to have somebody to talk to, period.
Right. Exactly. There was, I was in Odessa earlier in the year, and I went across the parking lot from my hotel, this little steakhouse, to have dinner and a couple beers. And so I'm sitting up at the bar, and I get to talk to some guys that are there. Most of the people out there work in the oil fields. And we got to talking. I told them I was in the military, and, what I did in the military, how long I was in. And these two guys looked at me, they're like, "How are you so relaxed and calm?" They're like, "We hired a retired Army dude, and he's always angry." And so I told him, I was like, "Well, maybe there's some treatment, there's some help that he hasn't gotten that he should be getting." Or I was like, but I also, growing up in the world of special forces as a Green Beret, like, it's a very professional environment. Not to digress, but being in special forces, I believe, really set me up for a much smoother transition to the civilian sector, because most of us are on a first name basis until you become like a sergeant major. We're calling you whatever your first name is, or once you become a lieutenant colonel, up, before that, we're calling you what your first name is. So it's a very relaxed environment where there's a professional courtesy. Like, yeah, you outrank me. I'm gonna call you by your first name, but I still know where I stand on that totem pole, and I'm not gonna cross those boundaries. So yeah, I think that right there helped me answer that question to those guys at that steakhouse, because I don't have to yell at people to get them to do what I want, to get them to work hard. A matter of fact, I believe yelling at someone is actually going to get them to work less hard for you. They're going to do a worse job.
Yeah, it might get done, but it's certainly not going to have the same quality or effect. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. My leadership philosophy that I share with people is, if you put people first, the mission will come first. And people kind of look at me. Some people look at me and they're like with a puzzled look, but I tell them, if the people that you work with know that you truly care about them, and that you care about what's going on in their personal life, what's going on in their professional life, and that you'll be there for them if they need help, they're going to work their butts off for you. And I mean, that's from my personal experience. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. But that's the way I approach these people. That's the way I treat them, is I put them first, and by doing so, they put the job first, and then provide awesome results.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I've seen the same. I treat these guys with respect. There is a pecking order in the construction world, right? So we have to report to a customer and owner. They're subcontractors for a reason, but I tell my guys when I meet these guys, if it's a trade I've never personally worked with before, like a company I've never worked with, I'll tell the guys, look, I'm going to lean on you for advice about everything. I'm not an electrician. I'm not a plumber. I might be a carpenter, but I haven't really had to swing a hammer except for stuff at my house for years. So I'm going to look to you for that. However, I'm going to have to be the guy that makes the last call, and it might not be the most popular, but I'm going to do it with your input in mind.
Right.
So let's go back. My kind of last question here, man. I really appreciate your time, Lou, and this has been really cool. You got some really neat insights, and I'm just so stoked to get a Charlie.
Yeah,
I'm so happy to get another guy that's been in engineering. That's really cool. So we've got a lot of folks that have been listening to this lately that are actively transitioning. I shared a photo the other day where a guy that's about to retire out of the Army caught wind of the podcast, and he said, "Hey, this is impacting my life right now in a good way." Like that was very humbling for me to see. So I know there are people listening that are going through that transition journey, and we need people bad. I put out that I think it's about close to 400,000 openings right now in the industry. So we know we need people. Maybe I'm a dreamer and I think we can backfill with all the vets that are getting out. But if we have those people, what would you say to them to encourage them to get in and realize it's not all about digging a hole the whole time? Like, there's more to it.
I would say it's extremely fulfilling. We possess a lot of transferable skills. Whether you grew up in the regular Army or special operations, there are skills that we have that the civilian world probably don't even know about. And bridging that gap is very important, but don't unselect yourself. Like when I went through Special Forces selection, there were people quitting. They're like, "Man, you just took yourself out of the selection process." So don't self-select. Give it a shot. It's not. I haven't had a very hard time transitioning. Like, my project management skills helped me get my foot in the door and get off on the right foot with the company. And it didn't take long for me to start learning the civilian terminology, like lugs and brick ledges and all these other special language that the subs have. Once I learned that, and I was able to, it was like I was finally able to communicate with my subs, and it just made the relationship stronger. But reading the plans, it fascinates me to do that. So I took to that really, really quick. But I believe what's made me so successful thus far is those character traits, all the different transferable skills I learned in the military, being like, the leadership, interpersonal skills, being a master trainer, I said I was a free fall instructor, but we're all like master trainers. If you're an NCO, especially, you're doing sergeant's time training, you're training your junior soldiers. That goes a long way. Having discipline, being, learning on a steep learning curve, having a positive mental attitude, having a no fail mentality, can do mentality. All those things are extremely important, and you possess that already, and that's something that's going to make you successful. whether you don't think you're qualified for the job or not. Because from what I've seen, there's not a lot of, I'm not going to say there's not a lot of, but in the civilian side, a lot of those values and character traits don't really exist, or at least they don't possess that many. One person doesn't possess that many character traits.
Yeah, it takes a lot to build that. And I always get a kick out of it when I ask this question, because I don't think I've had anybody really key in on the technical skills. It's always those soft skills that we possess that I think we do as veterans a really bad job of, like, we undersell ourselves in those skills that we have. So you're like, I was just this, I was just that MOS, I was just that job. I don't know anything. But coming out, even after your first enlistment, regardless of what service you were in, you're 22 years old if you were enlisted straight out of high school, and you're coming out with a lot of skills that these kids that, they're just graduating college or they're just a few years in the working world just don't possess yet.
Yep, exactly.
So, well, very cool. Lou, man, again, thank you. This is really awesome. I got to applaud you for reaching out, and I hope to link up someday, man. You're not too far. I'm up in Dallas, so we'll have to figure a day out to get together. So very cool, man.
It was an honor. It was a true honor to be able to talk to you and just share my story, my experiences. Like, I really enjoyed this.
Thanks, man. Hey, and if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, my personal email is gmezlu2@gmail. So that's Golf Mike Echo Zulu Lima Oscar Uniform and the number 2@gmail.com.
All right, very cool, Lou. Well, thanks again, man.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If you're a military veteran in the construction industry, or you're in the construction industry and support our military vets, and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, you can find me at constructionvetpodcast@gmail.com, or send me a message on LinkedIn. You can find me there at Scott Friend. Let's share the stories and motivate others.